Hello and welcome. It's dusk here at the Guiana Space Center, where we are coming to you live for a very special launch. It's the birth of a brand new constellation of satellites, and they are called OneWeb. Their mission to connect everybody in the world to high-speed broadband, and our mission today is to launch the first 6 of those satellites onto their orbits in space. Right now they're waiting inside the launcher on the pad. Liftoff is scheduled in just over 18 minutes' time. And they're flying on board a Soyuz launcher today. She stands 47 meters tall, and inside the very top of the launcher, underneath what we call the fairing, which is that pointy section at the top, are our satellites. If we take a look inside, we have 6 OneWeb satellites in there, and they're attached using a very special dispenser, that tube in the middle, which was designed specifically to host them. And we also have 4 mock satellites. We call them mass frequency simulators. They're the same mass, the same weight as the real things, and they're there to balance out the load, and a little bit like ballast in a boat. Now, we are going to go over to Stéphane Israël, because Stéphane is the CEO of Arianespace, and everyone's really had to innovate, because we are going to, at the moment, today we're launching 6 satellites, but we're going to be launching at some stage 36. Stéphane, thank you very much indeed for joining us. This is an exciting launch, isn't it? Can you tell us about the mission?
Yes, maybe about the launch, because tonight we are launching the first of a series of 21 launches for OneWeb. We signed this contract in London in June 2015, and tonight we are all gathered to make it happen, so there is a lot of passion and of emotion tonight.
And it's going to take us about 1 hour and 20 minutes to deliver all 6 of the satellites. Can you give us an idea what's going to happen during that time?
Yes, so we have decided 5 hours ago to fuel the rocket, and now we are in the very final operations. At 6:37 we will lift off. The mission will last 1 hour and 22 minutes. We will first have the work of the 3 stage, the Soyuz, during 9 minutes, and after we will have the Fregat, the upper stage, which will work up to 1 hour and 22 minutes. We will have the first separation of 2 spacecraft after 1 hour and 3 minutes, and then 4 additional spacecraft after 1 hour and 22 minutes. So we need to be a little bit patient up to 1 hour and 22 minutes.
And then we'll be waiting a little bit longer as well to ensure that we get our information from the launcher and come back into the range of tracking stations. So we'll probably have to be even a little bit more patient. Arianespace has done some exciting work in order to host all of these satellites, designing a new dispenser. Indeed, all the OneWeb teams. It's a very, very innovative constellation. All the OneWeb teams have worked really hard at this. You must be feeling very proud.
We feel very focused on the success tonight and on the mission.
Stéphane Israël, thank you very much indeed. You can take your place behind the fishbowl. Thank you, Stéphane. So Stéphane is going to take his place in the fishbowl behind me. You can see the teams in there. We have a number of teams operating, different teams operating here in the Mission Control Center. And this is the Flight Directorate. This is the desk where Stéphane sits. Now, he's told us what's going to happen during today's launch, but we're going to get a little bit more detail now in this film.
The first part of the flight is ensured by the launcher Soyuz in version STB. The liftoff is ensured by the ignition of the 4 boosters and the blockade stage. After 2 minutes, the boosters are separated, followed by the fairing 1 minute and 50 seconds later. The blockade separation happens after 4 minutes and 50 seconds of flight. The blockade stage is then ignited during 4 minutes and 40 seconds. After the blockade cutoff and its separation, the second part of flight begins with Fregat M flight. The first burns lasts 4 minutes, the second one lasts 2 minutes, and they are spaced out by an intermediate coast phase of 41 minutes. Once the spacecraft injection orbit reaches, the separation sequence begins with the simultaneous separation of two satellites after 1 hour and 3 minutes of flight. The second separation event occurs 19 minutes later with the separation of the last 4 satellites.
For OneWeb pilot launch by Soyuz, this network features Galliot, the station in French Guiana, Bermuda on the Bermuda Island, Saint-Hubert station in Canada, Svalbard station on the Norwegian archipelago in the Arctic Ocean, and New Norcia station on the west coast of Australia. The data collected by this station are immediately sent to the CDLS, the Soyuz Control Center in French Guiana, and to the FRECAT Flight Monitoring Center in Moscow.
Now, Soyuz is one of 3 launchers that we have here, 3 rockets, if you like. We have Ariane 5, which is the big one. Soyuz is the middle lifter, and then Vega, the small one. And we have, therefore, 3 launch zones. The Soyuz launch zone is about half an hour from the Mission Control Center by car, and it's near the town, in the commune of a town called Sina-Marie. It's about 17 kilometers from the town.
Since October 2011, Arianespace has been successfully launching Soyuz rockets from its equatorial home here at the Guiana Space Center. Consisting of assembly buildings, a control center and pad, the Soyuz launch zone is located about 17 kilometers from Sina-Marie. As you enter the town by road, you can see the well-known roundabout with its statue of a local bird called the scarlet ibis. It's the symbol of the town, which is built on the banks of the Sina-Marie River. As we continue up the river, we come to the listed bridge, built in 1956. It was named after the second and secret wife of King Louis XIV, Madame de Maintenon, who, legend has it, was born on the banks of the river. The town's church, Our Lady of Assumption, is considered an architectural masterpiece. It was designed and built by the Reverend Father Leroy in 1928 with enthusiastic help from the congregation. The Sina-Marie River is the 5th longest in French Guiana, and fishing is understandably an important activity here. Numerous birds gather in the estuary, where the mangrove swamps are teeming with wildlife.
And there's our drone flying, hovering over the launch pad there. You can just see it in the distance, get a really good image there of the Amazon rainforest, because that's where we are, of course, on the edge of the Amazon rainforest and the northeastern coast of South America. Now, you could think of our launcher as almost two separate parts, if you like. We've got the first 3 stages, which is called the powered phase of the flight, which gets us into space. And then on the top, it has something called the frigate upper stage. So we actually have 2 synchronized sequences for those 2 parts.
Attention pour H0, moins 10 minutes et 20 secondes.
And this is the range operations manager.
Début de la séquence finale lanceur.
And he has just announced the final phase of the synchronized sequence for the launch vehicle. So this means that the computers on the ground are running all the operations. They run an extremely impressive list of operations because it's all automated. And you can see there on the right-hand side what we call these status panels. All the systems across the base send their flight readiness status to those panels. And obviously they're a little bit like traffic lights. Green is go, and of course red is stop. And right now we are go for launch. They are giving us information on vital things like the state of the launch base, the safeguarding and telemetry, as well as weather and that sort of thing. Now, the Soyuz rocket is actually built in Russia and shipped, I believe, to French Guiana in 10 crates, and teams then set about assembling and mating the satellites. This is called the launch campaign.
The Soyuz V21 launch campaign began in early September 2018 and continued until December. On December 20, we transferred the frigate upper stage from the Soyuz launcher preparation building MIG to the F-Cube fueling facility in early January. Filling operations started at the F-Cube building in parallel. We also began launcher assembly as well as preparations at the launch zone ahead of the launch.
The VS21 flight will be the first launch for the OneWeb satellites company. The launch campaign has started with the arrival of the Antonov cargo plane on the 22nd of January. The 6 spacecraft and 4 mass flight simulators were transferred to S3B payload facilities with ground support equipment. Combined operations with launchers item have started right after the arrival on the 23rd of January with mass flight simulator mating on dispenser. In parallel, last electrical checks were performed on the 6 spacecraft and integration on dispenser has started on the 29th of January.
On February 18, the filled frigate was transferred from F-Cube to the S3B building.
The stack, made of spacecraft and mass flight simulators integrated on dispenser, was transferred onto the frigate stage on the 19th of February. The nose module, made of payloads, dispenser and frigate stage, under fairing, was transferred to the Soyuz launch pad and hoisted onto launcher on the 22nd of February.
At D-2 was the launcher rehearsal. At D-1, in parallel with the frigate rehearsal, the launch readiness review gave the green light for the launch operations to go ahead. Today, the final chronology operations are underway for a launch at 18:37 local time.
And here I am back in my commentary box. I've now come upstairs and watching the launch from the Mission Control Center. The commentary box is above the screens, and there is our vehicle on the pad, Soyuz, waiting for liftoff. And we also see images back there of the Jupiter Control Center, and these are the OneWeb teams. These guys and girls all know each other well. They've been working together very closely on this mission. Some of them for months and some of them for years. And Andreas de Olivares there is in charge of the launch for OneWeb. And here is the Minister for Solidarity and Health, Agnès Buzyn, who is watching the launch, the French minister there. Getting closer now to the next final phase of the synchronized sequence. You remember I said we had 2 synchronized sequences, and getting closer to that. And the teams who are watching over all these operations are in what we call the Launch Control Center, and here they are, you can see them in action. They are monitoring frigate's transfer to onboard power at this point in time. We have various teams working in here, one responsible for the ground operations, led by the launch site operations manager, and their counterpart on the Russian side, because of course Soyuz is a Russian launcher. And the other team's responsible for the flight readiness of the vehicle. led by the production manager. And the beginning of the final synchronized sequence, is about 5 minutes beforehand, and it's called Kluch na Start. And in the control center in Kazakhstan, there's actually a key which is turned to trigger that sequence, and key is Kluch, I believe, in Russian, and key on start is Kluch na Start. That white smoke you can see there coming out of the side of the launcher is it's the liquid oxygen which is burning off. Now, our drone is flying over here. We're looking at one of the viewing sites. This is called Colibri. It's the closest viewing site to the launch pad, and everybody there has got the front row seats for this launch, and I hope they've taken their mosquito spray with them, because as you could see back there, we are on the edge of the Amazon rainforest, and this is the time when the mosquitoes come out, I'm afraid to say. This is, we were looking back there at Joël Egalgi, who is the range operations manager. He calls out all the major events during the flight. Getting a really good image there of the launcher lit up. Bit cloudy there. A word about the final launch sequence. We're going to see, can you see those swing arms at the bottom? We've got 4 blue and yellow arms clamping onto the bottom of the launcher. And they have big weights, counterweights at the bottom of them, those yellow structures. We'll see those move away just before launch. Our satellites are inside there, waiting patiently for launch in first class. It's nice and cool in there. They've got air conditioning. And the mast on the right-hand side is...
Largage des ombilicaux, ciao.
Well, he's just announced the mast is containing what we call the umbilical lines. Those are the feed lines going up from the top of the rocket to the ground, and those have just been detached, and they fall into a basket which you can't see. You can't see them because they're inside the mast, but you'll see that mast and the one below it pull away just before the launch. Also, a quick word about the launch sequence. We switched the engines on 16 minutes before liftoff, at 16 seconds rather, and the reason for that is we need to check that they are working well. So we throttle them up slowly, and we increase the thrust slowly, and when they reach full thrust, the rocket lifts off. Nothing can hold it back, and those swing arms pivot away. Looking very relaxed in there. Everybody's done this many, many times before. Getting closer now to the 1 minute mark.
À tous de DDO, attention pour moins 1 minute. Top, H0 moins 1 minute.
And we are 1 minute to launch. We're orbiting the first 6 satellites in the brand new OneWeb constellation, built by the Airbus OneWeb Satellites joint venture, and we're flying on board the 21st Soyuz to launch from the Guiana Space Center. Our very best wishes now to all the teams.
Largage du Macazedem. À tous de DDO, attention pour le début de la séquence d'allumage lanceur. À 0-20 secondes. Largage du VKM. Allumage triétage. À tous de DDO. Attention pour le décompte final. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Top. Et décollage VS21 OneWeb F6. L'extinction est conforme à l'attendu.
And they are off. The first 6 OneWeb satellites have begun their journey, heading out north over the Atlantic towards the Caribbean. Look at that. Those engines on board Soyuz are pushing hard against Earth's gravity. We're burning 5 engines at the moment.
Tous les paramètres à bord sont normaux.
He's telling us that everything on board's going according to plan. And we've got 5 engines. We've got 1 on the main stage. We've got 4 on each one of those boosters. But it's the boosters that are doing all the work right now. Ah, look at that streak of light heading out across the skies here at the Guiana Space Center, out over the Atlantic Ocean. The boosters only burn for 2 minutes, but that's long enough for Soyuz to escape the pull of our planet. They're delivering 80% of our thrust right now.
Les paramètres propulsifs sont conformes.
And if we're lucky, we might see them falling away. I think we're going to see them being jettisoned. Look out for 4 dots. There we go. There they go. Look how they twist and turn. That's all part of the plan. Very beautiful sight, actually, to see that with the cameras. And now what we're left with...
Séparation des blocs BVGD confirmée.
He's told us that that's been confirmed. You can see that's what it looks like from in space. So they've burnt all their fuel. We don't need them anymore. And we are burning the main core stage, the Block A. And if you take a look...
Bonne stabilisation du lanceur suite à la séparation.
He's telling us that it's good stabilization after the separation there of those boosters. And you take a look at the front of the launcher, that's actually called the fairing, as I mentioned earlier.
Du bloc A est conforme.
And he's saying everything's going well. And the satellites are in there. And indeed, that fairing has been protecting our satellites. It protects us from the rigors of the launch. A number of things it needs to protect us from, notably the acoustic vibrations at liftoff. It's very loud, I'm sure you can imagine. It's also protecting us from friction, because as we fly through the dense part of the atmosphere, that creates a lot of friction on the outside, and that creates heat, of course. As we get higher up, the air gets thinner, and we have less and less friction. And if you look at the bottom left-hand side of your screen, you can see we are 116 kilometers above Earth. So we've gone above what we call the Kármán line. That's the border with space. So effectively, we don't really need our fairing anymore because we hardly have any friction, certainly not enough for it to be a problem. And so we can jettison it. This is the scheduled moment for jettisoning the fairing, and that's what it looks like from cameras on board a previous launcher. And he's confirmed that we have that separation. Now, if you have ever wondered how satellites work, how they get the internet to you, and how we all get connected, then you're in luck, because a man who knows is David Nemeth from OneWeb, and David is with me now. David, thank you very much for joining us.
Hi, Katie. I'm so happy to be here.
David, you're the Director of Systems Modelling at OneWeb. In a nutshell, what does that mean?
So my team is responsible for doing really detailed models of the satellites flying and connecting to ground stations and connecting the users, and really making sure that we've got the capacity that we want and that we know how to run the system properly.
Very important work. And we're coming up now on the scheduled separation of the next stage. We use a hot stage technique on Soyuz, which means we switch on the engine of the third stage before we separate the second stage. And more cameras there on a previous launch showing us.
Allumage bloc I, extinction bloc A et séparation.
And we have the confirmation there from the range operations manager. So we are now burning the third stage, and that's what it looks like. David, you can see your satellites for the first time. Can you talk through for us what we're looking at?
So what we're seeing here is the dispenser, which has 4 rings, which would, in this design, mount 32 satellites. We're launching 6 today, plus 6 mass frequency simulators. And the first 2 satellites you saw were at the top there. Those are going to be the first 2 to be ejected. The dispenser, the shape of the satellites are sort of a trapezoid, and they fit around.
I'm just going to stop you for a second with trapezoid. Now, can we imagine a triangle and cut the top off?
Very much like it. One way to think of it is like corn on the cob, and that's like the kernel. And it's narrow at the bottom, and it's wider at the top. And the satellites were actually designed that way so that we could efficiently put them in the dispenser and still use the most volume possible for our design.
So, with your corn on the cob analogy, then, the tube that we were looking at back there in the middle is the dispenser. So the tube is the corn.
The tube
is the cob.
The tube is the cob, which we will throw away when we're done. And the kernels are the satellites, which are we launching off now into space and which will start providing service for us.
Our team's looking very relaxed in there. The OneWeb teams, we're looking inside here, the Mission Control Center inside the fishbowl, given that it's got glass all the way around it. Just a reminder that we have the information on the screen there. Now, this is a replay we're going to look at. It happened, we lifted off, 7 minutes ago from the pad, David. I sent David outside to watch it from the terraces because you can't come here and not watch it with your own eyes. What was it like, David?
So I saw the satellite sitting on the ground earlier, and just now as I was outside, there was a fair bit of cloud cover, but we got a good view of it coming up initially and seeing the very, very bright flames coming out of the back. And it's an emotional experience. I mean, the experience is one of something we've been anticipating for a long time, and it's really exciting. But to see it going up is it's like a relief. We've arrived at a point. I know we have a lot to go, but it's a really happy to see it sent off on its way.
And you saw the launcher with the satellites inside. As you said, you saw that on the pad earlier today. That must have been quite emotional as well.
That was extraordinary. When they take you on the bus to see the satellite, you don't see it until the very end. You sort of come around the back, and then you see the open...
to see the launcher, you mean?
The launcher, right. You come around the back, and the doors are open on the surrounding building. And there it is in all its glory, and it was just remarkable to think that all of this building and all of this huge launcher was all for these satellites getting up to where we need them to go.
And of course, with our cameras, we got a very good shot as well of the boosters separating, which I doubt you will have seen with the naked eye. David, we're flying north. Can you just give us a bit of an idea of our flight path today?
Sure. So this satellite's going into a polar orbit, which means that it's going to be flying over the poles. It's going to start off coming up from French Guiana, which is on the equator, up past the east coast of Canada over the North Pole. And then it's going to come down the other side past China, Southeast Asia, through Australia, swing over the South Pole, and then come up again a little bit west of here, because the Earth will have turned a little bit while the satellite has gone around.
So we're tracking the launcher using what we call telemetry. We have telemetry stations or tracking stations picking up the signal. And Bermuda is the station we're using right now. This is the separation now of the third stage. It's burnt its fuel every time each section of the launcher. And we have confirmation there of that separation. Every time the launcher, section of the launcher uses up its... and he is confirming there that we've picked up the signal at the tracking station in Bermuda. So that's good. So we're starting the next phase of the journey now. The frigate upper stage is taking the wheel. It's getting ready to switch its engine on, actually. It's called the pre-burn phase, which means it gives a quick burst of acceleration to push the fluids back into the tanks, and that's to make sure that there's enough propellant in the engine. It's a bit like, isn't it, when you're in a car and you press the accelerator and you get pushed against the seat.
Exactly. I think of it more like it's when you have a bottle of ketchup and the ketchup's not coming out, and then you just get air, and you give it a good shake, and all of the ketchup goes to the front so that you can squeeze it out in this nice, smooth squirt. That's exactly what we're doing with the fuel in the frigate right now.
So the upper stage is taking us, I guess you could think of it as a bit of a kind of clever taxi driver, if you like. It can take its satellites anywhere they want to go. Where is it taking you guys today?
So our initial orbit today, as I said, is a polar orbit. We're going to go up to 1,000 kilometers, and they will be dropped off there. At that point, the OneWeb system the OneWeb flight operations team will take control of them and raise them up to their final orbit of 1,200 kilometers. So they have another 200 kilometers to go after today.
So they've got a bit of a journey, and they'll be doing those 200 kilometres on their own. We're supported, obviously, by the teams on the ground. It's all automated. Just a quick run-through of what you're looking at on the screen. Top right-hand corner, the trajectory, the planned trajectory, and the cross is the actual position. And there on the bottom right is the flight path you can see there that David just talked us through. Now, let's see how Arianespace has met the challenge of creating the OneWeb.
Tonight is the Soyuz launch VS21, the second launch of the year and, more importantly, the first launch of the ambitious OneWeb's Constellation program. VS21 mission is to bring the first 6 OneWeb spacecraft into a low Earth orbit, close to their operational orbit. This Soyuz flight will also embark 4 mass flight simulators mated with the OneWeb F6 spacecraft on an innovative dispenser system specifically designed for OneWeb. The OneWeb F6 satellites have been developed and manufactured by OneWeb Satellites in its serial production line in Toulouse. This first launch is an important milestone for the initial deployment of the OneWeb constellation that will be ensured with 20 other Soyuz launches performed from 3 different launch pads: Kourou in French Guiana, Baikonur in Kazakhstan, and Vostochny in Russia. For Arianespace, the journey began in June 2015 when OneWeb trusted on us to think out of the box for meeting the huge challenge to put in orbit over 600 satellites, with 21 launches of up to 32 spacecraft, and to be performed in less than 2 years. I would like to thank all the teams involved in this program, in particular OneWeb and OneWeb Satellites project teams, and also RUAG Space team. Constructive and pragmatic approaches with the same common goal have been always preferred for the benefits of this ambitious program. We have performed a really great job since 2015, which will continue throughout the deployment launches phase.
So lots of people involved in this project, David.
Yes, absolutely. And I think now would be a good time to mention that the satellites and the rockets are all what we're looking at today, and that's great stuff. But it wouldn't work without communication systems, and a lot of design work and a lot of really innovative thinking went in by our key technology partners, Qualcomm and Hughes Network Systems, to build a system that could actually transfer data over these satellites.
Number of people we're looking at here in the audience, Sir Richard Branson, and all watching intently. And so the speed and altitude, we are now travelling at 194 kilometres. Sorry, we're above the Earth, 194 kilometres altitude. We're travelling at coming up for 8 kilometres per second. 8 kilometres per second, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, not 8 kilometres per minute. That is extremely fast. Now, this coming up to the scheduled moment here, frigate shutting down its engine. This is the scheduled frigate cutoff. We get our confirmations a little bit later because the information needs to go via Moscow. So sometimes it takes a little bit longer, which is perfectly normal. It's all planned that way. Once frigate switches engine off, we enter what we call the ballistic phase. And ballistic is probably a word I'm guessing that you've heard quite a lot over the years. I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, that it means travelling without propulsion. So we are travelling high enough and fast enough to be able to switch the engine off and cruise without it. Various reasons. And to save on propellant and optimise the conditions. He says all the propulsion parameters are going well. OneWeb's doing a lot of work, important work, changing lives.
Half the world is unconnected. The tendency is to think, wow, the unconnected must be really missing out. But the connected are missing out just as much. What types of culture, traditions, knowledge, and talent is the rest of the world missing out on? OneWeb's mission is to connect all of the unconnected schools in the world, and there are many. The reason why we are here in Caracola is because it is so remote and so difficult to get to. Satellite internet is essential if we're going to be connected.
So when I said changing lives, I mean really changing lives. Bringing internet connections into schools must make a huge difference.
So connecting schools has always been one of the missions from the very beginning of OneWeb, one of the very important missions. And in support of that, we have sent emissaries to 6 schools around the world. You saw one of them there. As part of that program, the children of the schools got to name the first 6 satellites. We can go online to learn more about where these names come from and what they mean. But the school in Nepal named theirs Sherpasat. The school from Honduras named theirs Lempirasat. The school from Ecuador named it Chusigsat. The school from Rwanda named it Ikirikezosat. The Kyrgyzstan school named it Chingissat. And the Alaska school named it Nanuksat, which are much better names than we call them in the engineering side, which are things like F6, F10, and F11.
Well, I have to say, I think those are beautiful names, and congratulations to all of the children who thought of that and worked hard to find lovely names for the 6 satellites. We're in the ballistic phase. We are going to take a break now for about just over 20 minutes and switch off our microphones. We'll be coming back to you in just over 20 minutes at 17 minutes past 7 French Guiana time. That is 17 minutes past 10 Universal time and 17 minutes past 5 in Washington. We'll leave you with a beautiful replay of the launch.
Acquisition de la télémesure par la station de Svalbard. Activation du début du mode barbecue. fin nominal de visibilité de la station Svalbard en Norvège. Réacquisition de la télémesure attendue dans 20 minutes environ.
here on Earth. Right now, the 6 satellites are riding bareback on the frigate upper stage, what's left of our launch vehicle, and they are hurtling through space. Now, David Nemeth has been with me in the commentary box. David, you're here on the floor with us as well, so you can actually see him in real life. David, we've got lots of people watching us. Where are your people, OneWeb, watching us from?
So OneWeb has offices all over the world, and we have parties at every one of them. So we have people in London. We have people, shout out to the people in California. We have people in Virginia. There's actually 3 separate offices in Virginia.
And David, this was 41 minutes ago. You saw this, you were standing outside watching it. We watched it on the screens here at the Mission Control Center. It was a really spectacular launch, looking at it from my perspective on the screen. What was it like for you out there?
It was an interesting experience, because in one hand you're saying goodbye, but in the other hand you're saying hello to something, because these satellites have been inert and they will be inert until they're released. And so though we won't be able to actually see them and touch them again, we'll actually be able to get to know them and interact with them. So it's really exciting to watch it go up and think that I'm actually going to get to meet them for the first time soon.
We've got a great view of the boosters being jettisoned. The boosters are the 4 rockets on the side of the vehicle, and you can see how they twist and turn. This has all been very carefully planned that way. Once we lost the boosters, then the fairing was jettisoned, so our satellites were exposed to space. Then we switched on the 2nd, then the 3rd stage, and we picked up our signal at the Bermuda tracking station, heading north out over towards the poles. Then we switched off the engine on the 3rd stage, and then the next part of the journey began when the frigate upper stage switched its engine on. And we said that frigate is a little bit like a clever taxi driver, takes our satellites wherever they want to go. Frigate then switched its engine off again, and we went into what we call a ballistic phase. Ballistic meaning we are traveling without the engine, and that's precisely what's happening now. Indeed, frigate is also doing something called a barbecue, which means it's twisting as if on a spit, as if on a rotisserie, as you say in American, because why is that?
It's to keep it evenly heated on all, just like a rotisserie. When you're cooking, you want to keep it evenly warmed on all sides, so nothing gets too hot and nothing gets too cold.
So 43 minutes and 10 seconds into the launch. Just give us an overview briefly, David, of what OneWeb actually is.
So OneWeb is a project to provide global connectivity, and what that really means for us is that we need to make a system where wherever you are in the world, when you look up, there's a OneWeb satellite over your head that can provide you service. And it's a constellation of hundreds and hundreds of satellites in 12 planes, and it's a real remarkable thing to have this many satellites providing communication, because what it means is that there's a lot of capacity.
Absolutely. So let's just take a little closer look now at the Constellation.
There are nearly 8 billion people living in the world. Can you imagine the opportunities we could create by connecting them all? We can. So we've brought together world-class partners from a range of industries to revolutionize global communications, rapidly progressing from imagining to launching. We've transformed the satellite manufacturing process, producing the most efficient communications satellites yet. We've installed antennas around the world, with more coming every day. And we've built teams with deep knowledge that continue to fuel our progress. As we speed towards global service delivery, we'll continue to hit major milestones along the way, culminating in a global network that delivers low-latency, high-speed connectivity through a constellation of satellites and ground systems. By providing accessible broadband quality for everyone, everywhere, for today and tomorrow, we'll change satellite communications for the world, on the water, in the air, and on the ground. OneWeb is going to connect the dreamers, thinkers, doers, everywhere. We're reimagining global communications, so the global imagination can be unleashed. Get ready for a new world of connectivity. One world, one web.
One world, one web, access for everyone. It's a big, ambitious, and very, very innovative project. But what makes the OneWeb constellation different from other telecommunications constellations?
So the size, right? The number of satellites we have to have and the amount of infrastructure we have to support it changed not only. It had to change the way we thought about it from the design from the very beginning, right? It has. There was a lot of technology that exists. In a lot of cases, none of it was quite right? So things had to be changed. Things that we knew how to make 10 of, we had to figure out how to make 10,000 of. And so just the scale of the number of satellites we have to produce, the number of launches, the amount of ground infrastructure is simply astounding. And once that exists and comes into existence, we need an equally powerful system to manage it, to track it. We're going to have more information about some of these flight components than anyone else in the world because of the enormous number of flight hours we're going to have because we have so many units up in the sky. So it's a fantastic opportunity not only to provide a great service, but to learn a whole lot about the technology that exists today in a much greater level of detail.
But also, I mean, the huge challenges involved in building something from scratch, something which is brand new, effectively almost from, an idea in somebody's mind.
So exactly, and we had to get a lot of people to think differently about what it is that they normally did in a particular way. That included the way things were designed. It's one thing to build 100 of something every year, but if you're then asked to build 10,000, it's not just enough to hire 100 times as many people as you had before. Exactly. You have to think of a new way to do it, and you have to think of a clever way to do it.
And the people who have been doing that for the first 6 satellites are Airbus OneWeb satellites who've built the first 6. Let's hear from them, from Airbus.
Dear customers, colleagues, partners, and friends of the space industry, I'm really excited with the launch of the first satellites of the OneWeb constellation, and proud to tell you, yes, we made it. The design and manufacturing of the OneWeb satellites is the next chapter in a new space story and a revolutionary game changer in the space ecosystem. What we've done has never been done before in the space industry. In a record time, Airbus and a joint venture with OneWeb, together with our industrial partners, have designed and produced here in the Airbus facilities in Toulouse the first satellites of the OneWeb constellation.
Well, it looks like we've had a bit of a problem with our film there, which is a shame, but we can talk just a little bit about the manufacturing process, which has been incredibly innovative. You've had to develop, as you were saying before, it's one thing, building a certain small number of satellites, but actually building, it looks like we might be able to go back to our film. Oh, yes, and we have been able to.
I'm really excited with the launch of the first satellites of the OneWeb constellation, and proud to tell you, yes, we made it. The design and manufacturing of the OneWeb satellites is the next chapter in a new space story and a revolutionary game changer in the space ecosystem. What we've done has never been done before in the space industry. In a record time, Airbus and a joint venture with OneWeb, together with our industrial partners, have designed and produced here in the Airbus facilities in Toulouse the first satellites of the OneWeb constellation. And this has been enabled by dedicated industrial facilities and solutions for the series manufacturing. Everything is ready for the mass production of several satellites per day. This has really inspired us to develop new mindset in all areas, in design, in equipment supply, and in new approaches for production and test processes. This is real new space. We have successfully combined the innovation and large volume manufacturing techniques from aircraft production together with a big experience in building extremely reliable, high-performance space systems. The agility and flexibility of Team Airbus enables us to continue to be a major player in the rapidly evolving global space market. Airbus is totally engaged with Airbus OneWeb satellites to provide the customers with a high-performance and reliable system connecting the world. Airbus OneWeb satellites will now focus on ramping up production of the full constellation in its new factory in Florida, demonstrating once again agility. And I'm extremely proud of all the teams, Airbus, OneWeb, and the joint venture Airbus OneWeb satellites teams, all our industrial partners who have worked together, sharing know-how, efforts, and a lot of passion to make this new space a reality. Congratulations. This is the end of the beginning.
The beginning. But what happens next, David?
So once these satellites are in our hands, it's time to take all of this communications technology we've developed out of the lab and into the real world and test it over the air on real spacecraft.
And that's a really important phase, of course.
It's a big step because the real world conditions and the lab conditions are never quite the same. And we're doing a lot of stuff with that technology, and it's going to be really exciting to see that all come together.
So we know that there's a big difference between building 1 or 10 satellites to building, say, 600. And as you say, it's the end of the beginning. So let's take a look now at a film called The End of the Beginning.
Technological revolutions begin when it's time to evolve, when the needs of the future change. This story was written by many visionaries. They changed the way we move, the way we communicate, the way we think, and how we lead our lives. And now we're writing our own story, realizing the next technological revolution in space, in building constellations of thousands of satellites at speeds far faster and at costs far lower than anything seen before, to make a quantum leap in global connectivity and access. Inspired by visionaries like Henry Ford, we made the bet of producing satellites like we build cars and airplanes, on high-volume automated production lines. And today, we can produce 2 satellites a day. We designed from scratch independent and automated modules to build and test each satellite components. And today, costs, production, and testing time are minimized. And we give life to satellites in a fully digitized mass production assembly line. We wanted to create a modular and customizable satellite. And today, we can adjust our design for innumerable configurations to meet all the needs. We decided to integrate non-traditional partners, but with solid industrial heritage. And today, we combine the best of space together with the most innovative manufacturing technologies. We brought together a handful of creative people to change the way we think. And today, we are more than 200 people from broad backgrounds working together to realize the revolution in space. The world moves fast. We move faster. 3 years ago, we sought to create a new industry. And today, we're ready. Today, we're on the firing point, ready to take on all the new businesses and challenges. This is the story of a revolution in space.
Bienvenue and welcome to Kourou, the end of the beginning, a next step for our new space endeavor. Our Airbus OneWeb Satellites joint venture is just over 3 years old, and what we have accomplished is incredible. We started from a concept, and today we launch our first satellites. I'm proud of our team. They have worked tirelessly to realize this. And as you saw in the video, we are transforming the space industry. OneWeb, Airbus, and our industry partners are part of this story. Together, we are defining a new future in space, opening access to all, and building a new space ecosystem. Part of our DNA is captured in the words of a famous philosopher. Do or not do, there is no try. Join us. Congratulations, everyone, and bon voyage, F6.
And there they are, the guys who we've been hearing from, sitting in the Mission Control Center. The two from Airbus OneWeb Satellites, the manufacturers who've been incredibly innovative in building our first 6 satellites. So the frigate upper stage is scheduled to switch its engine on in just under a minute. So we are scheduled to be in the second pre-burn phase. We're having another catch-up moment. And if you look at the top right-hand side, well, let's just tell everybody what a catch-up moment is, as David explained earlier.
So this is, as I said earlier, you thrust a little bit to move the fuel to one side, just like giving the bottle of ketchup a good shake so that you can get it out of the hole properly.
Scheduled frigate second ignition. That means it's scheduled to switch its engine on again, and that's what it looks like. Frigate at that upper stage there, the gold structure with the spherical tanks on it. Some of those containing fuel and some of them containing things like avionics, kind of things that you find on an aeroplane. It was originally designed as an interplanetary probe, and it was adapted to fly on Soyuz, David. It can take its passengers pretty well anywhere they want to go, and it can actually switch its engine on up to 20 times.
And that's very important for the OneWeb dispenser. In this case, we're dispensing 6 satellites, but in the future, we'll be dispensing much more than that. And as we dispense the satellites a few at a time, it's important to thrust between releasing the satellites so that you can put a little bit of distance and put a little bit of velocity difference between the satellites to ensure that they are not at any risk of coming too close together, and to also space them out a little bit when they fly over the telemetry station for the first time in the North Pole.
Make sure that they don't bang into each other. And on the top right-hand side of the screen, you can see we're really climbed up to space now. Though we took a steep climb at the beginning, then we dipped down a bit. That's called the roller coaster phase, where we lose a bit of altitude in order to gain speed so that we can climb higher later in the flight. And now we've come up to a sort of a plateau-y kind of area, which means that we're on our orbit. If you look at the bottom left-hand side of your screen, our altitude is 1,000 kilometers above our Earth, and that is what we call our separation orbit. So we are now coasting without the engine. Frigate's getting ready to release the first 2 satellites. He's telling us that everything's going according to plan. We need to position them very precisely, David. We're going to release 2 and then 4. Why is that? How does that work?
So we would normally be releasing 4 at a time. In this case, we have 6 satellites, so we have to release 2 first and then 4. And the reason that you want to release multiple satellites at the time is just to reduce the amount of time it takes to get all of the satellites off the dispenser. So you don't want to release them all at once because they're too close together and they sort of will travel in a big heap over the North Pole. But if you release them one on the time, this mission would take a very, very long time to complete. And so we had to balance between getting things out effectively but doing it safely.
Just let's run through those speeds and altitudes again. Our distance in the middle.
Confirmation de l'extinction.
And he has confirmation there of the switch off of the upper stage. Just the distance is as if you were to draw a straight line from the pad to where the launcher is. And you can see we've travelled over 16,000 kilometres. And he's telling us that we're going into an orientation manoeuvre. Now, Andreas Dulvaris, who we've seen earlier, he's in charge of getting ready for today from OneWeb's side.
As we embark on this historic journey, I would like to thank all of those who have made this day a reality. I have been extremely pleased with how smooth this campaign has gone, which is a testament to all the hard work that people have put into the preparation for the launch campaign. I would like to thank the OneWeb satellite team, a joint venture between OneWeb and Airbus Defence and Space. Without them, we would not be here. They have truly done an amazing job in not only designing the satellite, but designing the first ever satellite production line that will be used to manufacture over 600 satellites. This is revolutionary in the space industry. I would like to thank the CSG staff for their support and cooperation, as their facilities and safety support are a critical element for a successful launch. Finally, I would like to thank our strategic partners, Arianespace and Arianespace Linköping, as they are critical members of the OneWeb team. This is not your typical launch service provider-customer relationship. This is much more. Both Arianespace and Arianespace have not only designed the first ever smart dispenser, but have been integrated in the OneWeb factory and responsible for the integration during the launch campaign. Today, we start this historic journey by launching 6 OneWeb satellites into a 1,000-kilometer circular orbit. Once we reach this orbit, the RUAG Smart Dispenser will deploy the first 2 satellites approximately 1 hour after launch. Then the remaining 4 OneWeb satellites approximately 20 minutes later. After the satellites are deployed, they will turn on and autonomously transition to a sun-pointing attitude. From there, the fleet management team will transition the satellites to the mission Earth-pointing orientation. Once the satellites are ready, they will be ascended to the mission orbit of 1,200 kilometers, which should take approximately 60 days, after which the satellites will go through a commissioning campaign, making them ready for use.
And there's Andreas in the Mission Control Center.
So that's a great reminder for me. I mean, I've been mostly on the side of developing the communication systems, and one of the great things about OneWeb is that you get to a point like this and you find that for 3 years somebody who's working tirelessly to develop an amazing piece of technology that you didn't even know you needed, and here it is all ready to go. And just the skill and the professionalism that everyone has brought to this, that it just comes out of the woodwork, it seems like, you know, just from that section. And so it's been great to see this day and to understand what Andreas has been doing sitting there for the last 3 years, because I never really fully understood it before.
Well, now you're getting a better idea, and I have to say, I mean, I think it's a feat of human engineering, really, what the teams do in the world of space engineering, because, you know, it's so innovative and so remarkable. And there's Greg Weiler, who founded the company, I believe. So we're now in the orientation phase. What's happening here is we're getting closer to releasing our satellites. The upper stage, the frigate. Oh, and here we are. Look, we have the scheduled moment
yes.
for those first 2 satellites to be released.
So you can see them moving away from each other, and that's to give them to make sure that they spend as much time as far away from each other as possible. That puts them in some very slightly different orbits to avoid the possibility of them getting too close.
And you can see there the trapezoid or trapezoid shape of them, a little bit like the corn on the cob, and you can see how that makes them fit very nicely onto this very specially designed dispenser, the dispenser being that tube in the middle designed to host the satellites, but also to release them. So it's a very clever piece of kit. So we are going to wait for the confirmation of that separation, which our range operations manager gives us. And while we're waiting for that,
confirmation de la séparation des 2 premiers satellites OneWeb, position 4 et 8, rang C.
And he's confirmed that we have separated your first 2 satellites, David. So that's a good start. We still have, and everyone's very happy there in Mission Control. And I can tell you that David's got a big smile on his face too.
So just so everybody knows, those 2 satellites were SherpaSat, named by the school in Nepal, and ChuSigSat, named by the school in Ecuador.
Great. And we still have 4 satellites attached, so obviously we're going to be waiting. We have to release those, and then we'll need to go into the tracking station to pick up their signal. But let's just talk a little bit about what's happening to our first 2 satellites now, David. Who's flying them? What's happening?
So right now they're on their own because they have been released from the dispenser and they have not yet come in contact with our telemetry and control station. And fortunately, they know exactly what to do. So they have been powered down. The onboard computers have been completely powered off to save the battery charge on the satellite while they've been waiting for launch. Now that they've been released, they will turn on, the onboard computer will turn on, and the first thing that it will do is run some current through a wire, which will melt it and release a very, very clever spring mechanism, which will release the solar panels. The next thing that it will do is it will decide that it needs a nice suntan, and it will go into sun pointing mode and it point its body so that it's getting the maximum amount of solar radiation so that it can maintain a positive charge on the battery. And it'll wait there, and it'll wait until it flies over the telemetry command, at which point our fleet operations team will get in touch with it and tell it what to do next.
So it's sunbathing. They're sunbathing.
They are sunbathing right now, which is funny because it's very cold up there, but it's very sunny as well.
And Arianespace is very well equipped to launch constellations of satellites. They have lots of experience already.
Contract was signed between Arianespace and OneWeb in June 2015 for 21 Soyuz launches. We are now about to place into orbit the 6 first OneWeb satellites. On top of offering a highly reliable launch solution, Arianespace was chosen by OneWeb for its team's ability to work on complex projects, including the development of innovative solutions such as the specific OneWeb dispenser system. A dedicated organization has been set up in Arianespace to meet the many challenges of the program and to be able to ensure one launch per month during the deployment phase. Regarding launch vehicle, Soyuz was the adequate solution to answer OneWeb requirements to deploy about 650 satellites within a 2-year period timeframe. Soyuz launch vehicle fitting to Constellation's need has been already demonstrated with more than 15 launches performed to low Earth orbit missions for other Constellation's programs. The frigate upper stage versatility associated with the dedicated dispenser allowed to perfectly answer to the OneWeb mission requirements. Arianespace and Starsem offer was based on the capability to operate the Soyuz launch vehicle from 3 launch pads, one in French Guiana, one in Kazakhstan, and one in Russia. This unique opportunity provides higher flexibility and reliability for the benefit of OneWeb. Launching from different launch sites will secure the deployment schedule, which is key to OneWeb, and this without preventing to serve other customers. Soyuz frigate proven industrial production capability was also essential to select the launch vehicle. The OneWeb demand led to almost double the standard production rate for a while. Only Soyuz frigate could meet this very demanding challenge.
Arianespace led the development of a new dispenser under OneWeb dedicated contract. This activity has been entrusted to Arianespace at Lidköping, Sweden. The main characteristic of OneWeb dispenser is to carry up to 32 satellites at a time and to separate them 4x4 with great accuracy. To answer OneWeb requests, new solutions were mandatory. Innovative technology was applied to trigger up to 256 redundant initiators, managing the smooth activation of the 4 connecting bolts of each spacecraft. Pre-integration of satellite on the dispenser at the factory to shorten the activity at the launch sites, allowing the high launch rate of 1 per month requested by OneWeb. OneWeb dispenser is a flexible and modular product. This made very easy its adaptation to the specific configuration of VS21 with 6 spacecraft and 4 mass simulators. In the same way, we are currently expanding its capacity to 36 satellites for the next flights. Finally, I would like to highlight the very good collaboration between OneWeb, Arianespace and Arianespace, which allowed to develop an innovative product answering challenging specifications.
Innovative indeed, and we have confirmation that the first 2 satellites have been separated from the dispenser, that tube in the middle, the cob in the corner on the cob, and they've moved away. Their next phase is sunbathing with their solar panels out in order to capture the rays from the sun and create electricity so that they can function. Now, Arianespace is, as we've heard, very, very expert at launching constellations. And just quickly before we go any further, for anybody who doesn't know quite what a constellation is, it actually means we've got more than one satellite in space, like a constellation of stars. You can have constellations of 2, 4 satellites, and of course you can have 80, and of course OneWeb is going to be 600, going on to 900. Now, launching that many satellites is really quite an innovative thing to do for any launch provider. And as I said, Arianespace is an expert. We've actually launched 109 satellites for constellations so far. And joining me now is Kerniston, who's the president of Arianespace Incorporated. Weena, thank you very much indeed for coming to the floor. Weena, that's an incredibly impressive track record, isn't it?
Yes, indeed. In fact, we've launched about 86 commercial satellites for Constellation and about 23 for ESA and the European community. And we still have about, in addition to this, approximately 600 satellites of OneWeb in our manifest, we have about 20 satellites for other customers, like the European community, ESA, and SES, for example. So we are
going to keep your microphone close.
Okay.
Thank you, Weena.
We are indeed in the middle of this constellation, and we look forward to continue that.
Absolutely. And what makes Arianespace so good at launching constellations?
Well, let's put it that way. Arianespace is good at launching anything. But let's start with the constellation, since we're talking about constellation today. It turns out it starts with our relationship with the customer. And in this particular case, in OneWeb, I'm looking at some guys in front of me here. We were, from the beginning, I mean, when I said from the beginning, there must have been, I don't know, 4 or 5 employees in the company when I started discussing OneWeb with those guys. And we had meetings at hotels here and there because there was no office, obviously. So that's how it started. And over time, we looked for solutions for OneWeb, and we ended up having found that the optimum solution for them is the Soyuz vehicle. But it turns out we did look at the Vega vehicle. We did look at the Ariane 5 vehicle. And we hope that in the future, Vega C and Ariane 6 will be part of the deployment of the constellation and the future constellation of OneWeb satellites.
Well, all I can say is I think you must all feel very proud, everybody who has been involved in this remarkable journey and this remarkable project.
It's not only proud, it's just you feel that you have accomplished something. And I think everybody, most of the people at OneWeb here in Kourou, in Virginia, in London, they all must feel very proud about this project. I mean, when I said I've seen people working day and night on this project, literally, it's not a joke because different time zone and they're always available on the phone, and it is a very proud moment for all of us.
Weena, thank you very much indeed, and congratulations to everyone so far. We still have 4 satellites attached, and we're still going towards the separation of those. Veena, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Let's take a look now at some of the constellations, in fact, all of the constellations that we have launched.
Said she doesn't like sugar, so why'd you say the sweetness makes the lover? And then you told her she reminds you of your mother. And she doesn't like butter, so why'd you slime around under those covers? Melted through her hands and down the gutter. She cannibal that lies inside the lover. She's not biting 'cause she don't like it when it's red. She's not feeding 'cause you keep bleeding over her.
One minute and 1 hour rather, and coming up to 17 minutes now into this launch. Let's just have a recap, David, on what's been happening so far. We're basically driving with our taxi driver to the next drop-off point to release our next 4 satellites.
So that's right. So our next 4 and final satellites are going to be dropped off. And then after that, we're actually going to do a bunch of practice maneuvers to simulate dropping off a full load of satellites, just to make sure all the maneuvers work and the frigate performs as expected.
Should we just remind everybody of our flight path?
Yes, so we are...
where did we lift off and where are we going?
So we just lifted off. We lifted off from Kourou, here in Kourou, and we have swung around the Earth, and we are...
We went past, we headed up over the North Pole, didn't we?
We headed up over the North Pole.
Yep. And we came back down.
And then we came back down, and then we were just in contact with New Norcia in Australia, and we are swinging around under Antarctica, and coming up the other side back towards the equator again.
Now, right now we're outside the tracking stations range. So what that means is the tracking stations... let's just explain to everybody a little bit about telemetry, because the tracking stations have great big dishes, and they're kind of watching out, listening out, sensing the launcher as it flies over. The launcher sends a signal back down to the ground. How does it work?
So the challenge with this is that the spacecraft is doing something all the time. It's collecting data, it's got sensors, and all this is being gathered on the onboard computer, and it's firing things, and it has to get confirmation that things worked properly. But we don't have tracking stations everywhere in the world. It's very hard to put a tracking station in Antarctica, and so on and so forth. And so what happens is that the computer will store the information that it's collecting, and it will wait for the next opportunity to talk. When it comes into a tracking station...
You can see them there. Galileo here in French Guiana.
Exactly.
Bermuda we picked up. Then St. Hubert in Canada is one of the tracking stations.
Exactly. So you can see we were just under Antarctica. There's nothing in Antarctica. So right now it's storing up the data for what it's doing. And when it comes back over a tracking station, it will establish the communications link. And the computer up there will say, oh, I can talk to the computer down here. Let me send it all of the data that I've collected until now.
Sorry, go on.
So not just the frigate has obviously telemetry, and we're using that for this mission here. The OneWeb satellites do the same thing. Unlike a geo satellite, it also will fly over Antarctica, and it's very hard to talk to a satellite there. And so we actually have 2 tracking stations up near the North Pole, one in northern Canada, one in Svalbard. Svalbard is a little tiny island north of Norway, above the Arctic Circle, very, very close to the North Pole. And it's a very handy spot for us because every orbit travels over the North Pole and is visible every time it goes around. And so our satellites, just like the frigate here, as they go through their mission, will gather data, will gather performance data, will monitor things like battery charge and temperatures and so on and so forth. And then when they come around again, that is our opportunity to download all of that data into our systems and really take a close look at how the satellite's performing and what its state of health is.
And of course, all the teams in those tracking stations along the flight path, they're listening in as well to the range operations manager here at the Guiana Space Center. Now, the telemetry is received here at
what we call the CVI. These are the teams who receive the information from the tracking station. So the vehicle sends the information to the tracking stations, who send it then to the CVI for them to analyse. They do various things. They use the information to see how the flight is progressing in real time. There's Claude Legrand, who we saw talking in an earlier film. And they also use the information to evaluate the flight, check it out, see how it went, and they use that information to optimize the following flights. Now, we also have a telemetry team in the control center in Moscow, the Mission Control Center there in Moscow. It's called SOUP, and you could just see back there they have really great big screens in their Mission Control Center. I've actually seen those when I was doing astronauts launches, and it's really quite impressive to see an astronaut floating into the International Space Station on that great big screen.
Well, it seems to be a design characteristic, because in our Fleet Operations Center in Tyson's Corner, we also have a very great big screen right now as well.
Oh, I'm glad to hear that. You know what? Something that always strikes me is that it looks like things are happening very slowly in space, but actually they're happening very quickly. We're flying very fast. Although we don't have our telemetry information on the screen right now, I'm guessing we're flying in the region of about 7 kilometers per second. Now, we are going to be waiting to enter into the telemetry station in Galileo, but this is the scheduled moment for us to separate the next 4 satellites. Now, this is what it looks like. This is the simulated image, the CGI image based on the predictions, the data that the experts have put into the computer. You could see them there moving away in 4 directions opposite each other, couldn't you, David?
Exactly, and it's a very nice configuration to do, as it keeps the satellites far apart. It puts them in slightly different orbits, and it's a safe thing to do. You'll notice we did not release the mock satellites. That's very important, because they need to come down again. One of the things you said about space, where things move fast and things move slow, it's very slow if you're next to the satellite, or next to the dispenser, which has just released something at a very stately pace. If something comes in another orbit, it can be coming at a very, very high velocity and do an enormous amount of damage. And so keeping space clean is a very, very big part of the OneWeb mission. And taking this dispenser and the mock satellites and taking them out of orbit when we are done with them is an important part of this. And when our OneWeb satellites are finished, we will be, as we replace them and as they end of life, we will be taking them out of orbit as well.
And just to remind everybody, we're going to be going back into the range of the next tracking station in about, probably about maybe 13 or 14 minutes' time. Now, that tracking station's it's called Galileo, and it's the one that's here at the Guiana Space Center. So when we do that, we will have done a full lap of the Earth. But before we can confirm the separation of those satellites, we need to go back into that tracking station and as David was saying, the satellites will check in there. And this is the launch pad, David. This is you can just see there what's left over. Now, I have to tell everybody that when I've been on this launch pad, and you can't see them very easily, but there are some bushes right next to it, which are always green, despite being right next to a launch pad, which is remarkable. It's fully lit.
So one thing we saw today was there's railing. So you've got the rocket and you've got the flame pit, and there's a little bar across with a railing with these little struts. One of the struts had a large wasp's nest on it, which has clearly been there for many, many, many months, and it seems to have been there, sitting there very happily through multiple Soyuz launches.
Remarkable. And here is the launch. This was over an hour and 20 minutes ago now. It was really nice seeing it. We've got our drone there, which is actually a new shot for us. We haven't had the drone that close yet, so this is really nice to see this. You can just see, on the ground, the gantry. That was the building that was covering the launcher. Great shots there of those engines burning, boosting us away from our planet. And lucky enough to see those 4 boosters
being jettisoned. Oh, I love that picture of the twisting and the turning. It's like a ballet, and it's all been very carefully planned. So, David, let's just talk a little bit about OneWeb and how it works and what it does. This is a field that you are very much an expert in. Why should anybody really care whether their connectivity is over satellite or over fiber?
So that's a good question, and the answer is nobody should care. People should get service where they want it, to get the kind of service and the kind of bandwidth they want, and it should be easy to get, and it should be reasonably priced. And they shouldn't have to understand if it's satellite or this or that. Really, a great system and a really great technology will almost disappear, and people will just understand no matter where I am. I can put down a terminal, I could put down a flat panel, I can turn it on, and it will find the satellite, it will get service, and I don't even have to, all I have to understand is that it needs to see the sky. That's all I need to know about satellite.
So how does yours look? How does yours work? Have you got a box? Have you got a panel or a dish that you put on your building?
So we have a multiple. These are called the user terminals, right? And it's interesting to stop and think. We've got all the space stuff and we've got all the network stuff and all this big fancy equipment. But the thing about satellites, the end user doesn't see any of that, right? They don't need to know about that. I mean, they may think it is cool, like I do, and they'll want to know about that, right? But if all they want is internet service, right, they don't need to know about that. They just need to know that they have a user terminal. And for most people, that's how they're going to interact with the OneWeb system. And so we've put a lot of focus on making that process a lot easier than it's traditionally been. So in a traditional geosatellite, you've got a dish and you've got, a bunch of kit, and it's gotten better over the years, but it's still at the point where you have to point it at the satellite. You have to make sure it's turned the right way so it's not interfering with other satellites. You've got to line it up just so. Maybe you have a special piece of equipment, a special spectrum analyzer or something to get it all lined up, right? And really, what we've done with the OneWeb system is we've adopted the technology that cell phones use. It's called LTE, or long-term evolution, and we have adopted that. And the way your cell phone works is you just turn on the cell phone. You don't have to tell it where the nearest tower is. You don't have to tell it what frequency to use. You don't have to tell it anything. You get the phone, you take it out of the box, you plug it in, you put in your little SIM card so they know who you are, and then you're connected. Right? And the idea behind the OneWeb terminal is the same thing. You want to take it out of the box and put it down and be connected. So we have multiple designs. The very exciting one is the electronically steerable antenna. So we've actually just shown one, I think, at Mobile World Congress, which is this week in Barcelona. And this is a big flat panel. It is, it looks like there's a plastic shell to keep the electronics dry, right? But it's flat and it's wide. It's not very heavy, and all that somebody has to do is put it in a stable place with a view to the sky, and make sure it's level. I don't have to know which way to point it. I don't have to know anything about that. Just put it in, get it roughly level, and you're off to the races at that point.
That's great. I guess it's a bit like I don't need to know how my TV works, but I do want to be able to use it.
Exactly. And when it gets too complicated that doesn't work, you get very annoyed at your television.
That's very true.
It shouldn't be that way.
Was it hard to develop this technology? It sounds quite complex. It sounds like a simple piece of kit, but it sounds like a lot of work went into actually developing that. So
electronically steerable antennas have been around for a long time. But they've always been specialty items, military items, that sort of thing. And like many things here, the revolution has been in getting something that used to be very expensive, very inexpensive. What's interesting is that we had to solve a lot of hard problems to get the OneWeb system to work at all. So the satellites move, and so you need an antenna that will track the satellites. I have to be able to switch from one satellite to the other in the middle of somebody watching Netflix, and they should experience no interruption whatsoever.
Hold that thought, David, because we have a film about OneWeb, and we're just going to take a look at this now.
Half of the entire world is unconnected. We're here at Karakola School in Nepal.
one of millions of unconnected schools in the world.
Harikola is one of the remotest area of Nepal. The kids deserve to have the same opportunity that the other kids are having in the cities.
My name is Elina Thapamagar and I am 15 years old. I want to become a doctor because doctor can give people new life.
गाडीहरू बसहरू आउन प्लेनको लागि चाहिँ हामीसँग एकदम गाह्रो छ अनि सामग्रीहरू लिएर आउँदाखेरि पनि खच्चरबाट किताबहरू सबै हामीले काठमाडौँबाट चाहिँ बोकेर लिएर आउनुपर्छ यहाँ अहिले हाम्रो बच्चाहरूको धेरै राम्रो क्यारेक्टर उनीहरूको खुसी छ राम्रो छ र उनीहरुमा यस्तो क्युरियोसिटी छ उनीहरुलाई चाहिँ सिक्न चाहन्छ
My name is Pramisa Tamang. I want to be a staff nurse.
मेरो नाम मिङमा शेर्पा हो म ठुलो भएपछि चाहिँ मोडेल हुन चाहन्छु
यदि हामीसँग इन्टरनेट भइदिएको भए युजबाट चाहिँ धेरै सजिलो हुन्छ हेर्न खोज्नको लागि पढ्नको लागि सजिलो हुन्छ
Access to information creates opportunity. For millions of kids who are unconnected, opportunity remains out of reach. With access to internet, distance is no longer an obstacle or a limitation on what kids can become, what they can learn about, what they can aspire to achieve.
Hello, I'm Arpana Rai, 17 years old, and I want to be a teacher.
नेपालमै पाइलट बन्न चाहन्छु म हेलिकप्टरबाट अरू ठाउँ हेर्न चाहन्छु
यदि यस्तो खालको अवसर पायो भने पक्कै यिनीहरूको भविष्य पनि धेरै राम्रो हुन सक्छ
OneWeb's mission is to connect all the unconnected schools in the world, and there are many.
I can be a teacher. Yes, because I like this.
My name is Prashant Rai. Yeah, I will try to make a satellite in my future life.
We're building the world's largest constellation of satellites. This will give students the tools they need to build any future they can imagine. We are here to give these kids a stake in our mission. They will choose the names of our first 6 satellites, and we will launch their school into orbit. We're launching more than just satellites into space. We're launching opportunity. Together, we can empower humanity.
I think that just really shows us how important it is to connect, not just schools, but people all over the world. I mean, I think that a lot of us take our very high-speed broadband for granted. We become dependent on our devices, and then when we don't have broadband, suddenly life is very difficult. And yet, lots of people around the world don't have it. Connecting schools, connecting hospitals, enabling all kinds of activities. It has to be a very, very important thing. We call this, sorry to interrupt you, but we often call this in the business bridging the digital divide, the sort of the haves and have-nots when it comes to the internet.
Exactly, and I think that's it's an incredibly important mission. And you know, as an engineer, it's very easy to get bogged down in the technical details, in the rockets, in the satellites, in the algorithms, in the models, and all of that stuff, which is fascinating. It's fascinating work, and I wouldn't train it for anything, but it's great to step back in a moment like this and understand sort of the impact that it has on people's lives and the importance that it has on people's lives, and it helps you get through some of those tougher engineering moments when maybe things aren't going so well.
Which is always the way, of course, with engineering, because it's all about solving problems. And, you know, you've been at OneWeb for 3 years, David. I believe that you started about 3 years ago. OneWeb is a really very, very innovative organisation. It's been breaking the mould. It's been disruptive in organizations, companies, manufacturers have had to really think outside the box to enable the technologies. So it's very, very exciting. What was it like when you first arrived 3 years ago?
So it's funny. So I arrived 3 years ago. I was not there at the very beginning, so the pictures of the garage in California was before my time. But I arrived just after they moved to Virginia, and a good chunk of the company had joined the joint venture and moved to Toulouse. So I had left a job that was a stable company, was doing fine. I had a nice office with a window, and I had not on the top floor, on the ground floor, but it had a window, and a little fridge and whatnot. And so I joined OneWeb, and we were in the bottom floor of this old apartment building in Virginia, and we had 2 rooms, and I was in the back windowless room with cement walls, cinder block walls all the way around. And 2 weeks in, they did us a huge favor, and they painted them a slightly more cheerful color to make it palatable. There's some old cubes in there that were teeny tiny cubes. It was an old air conditioning rattling overhead, it would blow cold air on you, it would make a noise. You couldn't sit too close to it because it was distracting. And, in a short period of time, we had a lot of people packed in this very small space. And I remember coming in on my first few days and sitting in my little tiny cube and thinking, this is fantastic. This is just the place that I want to be right now, because it was such a fantastic opportunity to work on a project like this, and it's great to see these successful milestones. But in the beginning, when it's just an idea and it's forming, and you get a chance to steer it a little bit and to shape it a little bit and to work out some of the kinks along the way, that's really what makes engineering exciting.
And we've had confirmation that the next 4 satellites have been separated. We've gone back into the range of the tracking station here at the Guiana Space Center. Some very happy faces. Huge congratulations to everybody involved. Congratulations to all the teams.
Thank you very much, and thank you to Arianespace for delivering them safely where they needed to go. This is for us at OneWeb and the communications teams the start of a lot of work, and we're really very excited to dig into it.
This is a good feeling. All the teams have worked very hard for this day, and some of them are, of course, going to be continuing to work very hard, because we're going to be doing some rehearsals. But before we talk about that, David, this has got to be a good feeling.
It's indescribable. You work for a moment for years and years and years, and sometimes you think you're going to make it, and sometimes you don't think you're going to make it. And engineering is just, you find a problem, you work through it, you find a problem, you work through it. And at one point you look up and you realized, I've solved all the problems that I needed to solve to get here. And this is what I was trying to do all that time. You spend so much time looking at the problems that you forget to sit back and look at, this is an amazing thing that we're building, and this is an amazing moment for us. And we've built these 6 satellites, and they're now orbiting the Earth.
There's some applause coming up here.
Hugs all around. There's Greg.
Greg Weiler, whose
vision really started the whole thing.
Yes, whose vision started the whole thing. He had the idea of bringing satellites closer to Earth when he was trying to connect schools, I believe, in Rwanda many, many years ago. So he's brought that to fruition, and that's one of his children there. His wife and kids are here. I think this is a very big day for everyone. This is the beginning now of the next phase of your... Very happy. Very, very happy.
Well, it's nice to stay up late, too, isn't it?
It is nice to stay up late. So the beginning now of the building of your constellation and the orbiting of your constellation.
So, ladies and gentlemen, dear customers, dear partners of OneWeb, so Arianespace is delighted to announce that the 6th first satellite of the OneWeb constellation have been separated on their targeted low Earth orbit. So tonight is a full success. And I would like to say that this success comes from far. In French, we would say, ce succès vient de loin. I'm not sure that my expression in English, success comes from far, is perfect, but I will explain why. From far with our customer OneWeb. You can imagine that deploying more than 600 satellites, having signed for 21 Soyuz, has not been done like that in 1 minute. First time we spoke about this project, it was in January 2014. It was with Greg Weiler. I remember very well because it was late in Moscow. I was in Moscow, so it was a coincidence. And Greg told me, Stéphane, are you interested by launching a lot? I said, yes, I am. And then we elaborated a lot for OneWeb. We have had a lot of discussions. We made many milestones towards this project for OneWeb. We signed in June 2015 in London. We have had discussions with OneWeb CEO, today Adrian, yesterday Eric, and I want to thank both of them and Adrian tonight with us, Adrian Steckel. And tonight we are there. I want to say as well that Winner Carnissan has been totally instrumental for this success. Winner is the one who has always believed in this project and who has always told us, make it happen and work with the customer. So we are there tonight. Congratulations, Winner. But tonight's success is also the success of the supporters of OneWeb, the ones who have backed the project since the very beginning. I would like to quote three big backers of the project. SoftBank, for sure, and we have tonight with us Mr. Sunagawa, and I want to thank him for his presence. I want to quote a second strong supporter of OneWeb, who is with us in the Guiana Space Center tonight. It's Sir Richard Branson, and Richard has been also instrumental for this success, and he has had a big success with his Starship 2 a few days ago. And last but not least, because I know he's watching this webcast from Toulouse, I want to thank deeply and personally Tom Enders. Tom has always believed in this project. I met him a few days ago in Toulouse, and he told me that before going to new orbits, he wanted this orbit to be reached with OneWeb, and this is done tonight for this sixth first satellite. Referring to Tom Enders, I want now to refer to OneWeb Satellites. OneWeb Satellites is a joint venture between OneWeb and Airbus Defence and Space. We have with us the CEO of OneWeb Satellite, Anthony Gingis, and he will deliver a speech. And we have as well Nicolas Chamussy, who is the CEO of Airbus Space Systems. So tonight it is the first 6 satellites of OneWeb Satellites, but it is also the 124 to 129 satellites orbited for and with Airbus Defence and Space. And this is also the reason why this success comes from far. This success comes as well from far with another key partner. This partner is RUAG. RUAG is a Swiss company which has been present in the story of Arianespace since the very beginning. RUAG is delivering the fairing of Ariane and Vega, but RUAG is also responsible for launchers equipment, and tonight the dispenser was made by RUAG, and tonight it was for 6 satellites, but by the end of the year it may be for 32 and up to 36. This dispenser has been developed by RUAG under the responsibility of Arianespace team. This success comes also from far with our Russian partners. Tonight, it is the 47th launch we deliver with Roscosmos. We have delivered 26 with Starsem from Baikonur, and we have delivered tonight the 21st launch from the Guiana Space Center. So I want to deeply thank Roscosmos, all our partners for this success, R4C Progress, and PO Lavochkin Tsenki. This launch was perfect. Our partnership is a great one. And tonight, we make together the first launch of a big journey. We have 20 more Soyuz to deliver together. This success is also the success of the European team, ESA, CNES here in CSG. Soyuz in CSG is an ESA program, and I want to thank all our ESA and CNES partners for this achievement. And for sure, I want to thank my team of Starsem and Arianespace. This team is made of Victor Nikolaev for Starsem, François Barrault, Marc Grossech for Arianespace. They are fully dedicated to our partnership with Roscosmos and fully dedicated to our successes, and we owe them a lot for what has happened tonight. So now I would like to call to the stage our partners and customers for this great event. Thank you very much.
So, first of all, Stéphane, thank you very much, and to all of the partners that have worked with us. And all I can tell you is I'm really relieved. It's a lot of hours of tension. We still have a little bit of tension because we need to connect with our spacecraft, but none of this could have been possible. First of all, of course, Greg for having the idea, for filing with the ITU, for stubbornly moving forward, getting people excited, and for 350 people at OneWeb, for hundreds more between OneWeb satellites, Airbus, Arianespace, RUAG, Qualcomm, we're working on the chips. We are a group effort among lots of companies. And talking about what we talked about earlier today, I don't think we really understand what we did today. I think that the amount of useful space to be monetized, to change the use cases, it's tremendous. And we don't really know everything that we can do. And listen, I'm very thankful to be able to work at this company. It's very, very few times that you get an opportunity to work in a company that has this much scale, this much impact, and really the notion of doing some good is not some PR. It's deep in the foundations of the DNA of the company, and we're very much looking forward to doing our part to connecting as many schools as we can in partnership with our partners and governments. And the last thing is, I can see that this is a great European effort, and I think that is very meaningful for us as a, I don't speak British, but we are a UK company, for the French as well. Tony's very English or French, and so we're very delighted to work with everybody and to make OneWeb and all its partners as successful as possible. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Adrien. Good evening to everyone here in French Guiana. Bonsoir. Good evening also to our friends and colleagues who are throughout the world. I mean, there are various places worldwide watching this live stream. Allow me to give a warm applause to those guys in Toulouse. We had more than 1,000 people in Toulouse watching live, and that's very good. And he was here. I mean, I think he left a few minutes ago, but as you did, Stéphane, I would like to very special tribute to Tom, the CEO of Airbus, who has been really pivotal in engaging Airbus in this amazing OneWeb venture from the beginning. Means three and a half, almost 4 years ago. Was really great. And last but not least, a warm welcome to our colleagues, partners, friends of the space industry, again, worldwide. And if you allow me, I would like to have a special tribute and thanks and congratulations to some teams. First of all, the OneWeb. Greg and Adrian, I think you guys, congrats for taking your first steps today to close the digital divide. Your dreams is also our dream, is becoming a reality today, and you need to be warmly thanked for this. Well done. Second one, it's Airbus OneWeb Ventures, and Tony, you are the man here, and Stéphane, you mentioned Eric. Eric, your predecessor, did also a very great job. I think the teams at Airbus, together with the industrial partners, taking on this challenge to design and manufacture the OneWeb pilots in such a short and challenging time frame, which was absolutely amazing. At the same time, setting new standards for the space industry. Everything is ready for the mass production of several satellites per day. It's a short sentence, but it means a lot for us. It's been a real challenge to get here, but here we are, eagerly waiting for the first telemetry signals from above ahead. Couple of minutes from now, just waiting. And if you hear something, just wave at us. Third one to be thanked, Arianespace and Stéphane again for several times. I mean, you and your teams with the Russian colleagues have delivered again spot on, providing world-class access to space, and really be thanked for this. Last but not least, I would like also to thank our institutional partners, and we had the French government representative here this evening. Thanks for their strong support in this ambitious program and for having helped us to make new space a reality. This OneWeb experience has really inspired us to develop new mindset in all areas, in design, in equipment supply, new approaches for production and processes. This is real new space. And you can trust on us to keep evolving and improving with OneWeb to ensure to remain the leader for developing constellations in the years to come. Thanks to everyone involved in this program who have worked together, sharing know-how, efforts, and I think it's very important, also a lot of passion. Days like today are a reward. Let's embark full speed in the next steps, churning out the satellites for the entire constellation from a brand new facility in Florida. As it was said several times this evening, this is only the end of the beginning. Thanks very much.
Okay, so dear friends, maybe a few more, because the night is just starting. Nicolas said this is just the end of the beginning, and so we have already some next steps. First, as we do every time, I would like to announce our two next launches. And next one will be with our Vega champion for OHB Italia on behalf of ASI. And it will be a very important satellite. It will be an Earth observation satellite, Prisma. It will be the 14th of March. And second, Soyuz will be back in the Guiana Space Center, 29th of March, for a very key partner and customer for us. It is SES O3b. We will deliver the 5th launch of O3b SES, the 29th of March. Okay, but there are two other things more. During the evening, we will have the pictures of the launch, because we had onboard camera, and we will have wonderful pictures. They are not totally ready yet, but they will come soon, and it will be part of the show, and we will see amazing pictures of tonight's success. Moreover, since months we are discussing with our partner OneWeb on what we could do together on top of the 21 Soyuz. So we have a lot to do together, but we are not satisfied, because we are happy with the 21 Soyuz, and we have seen tonight our Soyuz is amazing, but we need a little more. And so I am pleased to announce that Arianespace and OneWeb have reached an agreement that completes its current launch services order with Arianespace. This agreement consists of OneWeb's use of the inaugural Ariane 6 flight. It will be an Ariane 62, as well as 2 options for 2 future Ariane 6 missions. So I can announce tonight that the maiden flight of the Ariane 62 will be delivered for OneWeb. And so maybe we could have on stage Greg, Winner, Adrian, Nicolas, and Anthony, just to celebrate this success. So come with us, please. Okay, end of the show. You want to say?
That's 27 rockets.
No. Okay.
So everyone having their photograph taken now, having announced that the maiden voyage of the new Ariane 6-2 version will be carrying the OneWeb satellites. So it's mission accomplished once again for Arianespace. OneWeb's first 6 satellites are all heading out, going through their sunbathing operations and heading towards their final orbital slot in space. Congratulations to everybody at OneWeb. Congratulations to Airbus OneWeb satellites for this major achievement. Congratulations to you, David, and your teams.
Thank you, and a big congratulations to everybody at OneWeb, not just all of the space teams, but the comms teams, the systems engineering teams, all of the support that goes into it. Finance has done a fantastic job, and everybody at OneWeb who's worked to make this happen.
And congratulations to all the Russian and European teams for Soyuz for its perfect 21st launch from the CNSG, and of course to everybody at Arianespace for an excellent job.
And best of luck to all of the OneWeb teams for their next phase of operations. And I would just like a shout out to the communications teams. Your moment is going to be coming up soon when we do our first demonstration of connectivity through our terminals over these satellites. So your moment in the sun is coming, but you've got as much work to do as these guys have just done.
And congratulations and good luck, best of luck now to all the teams as they go through the final rehearsals for the upcoming launches. So thank you for joining us here live at the Guiana Space Center from me, Katie Haswell.
And me, David Nemeth.
Goodbye.
it's Bloomberg Daybreak. You know the way Bloomberg